everybody, welcome back. Welcome back to Sandy's English Corner, the place to learn English. Lovely to see you again. In the previous lesson, we spoke about how to greet others in formal and in informal situations in English. So if you haven't seen that lesson, it's really worth going back and having a look at that one first. But in today's lesson, we are going to learn all about how to introduce ourselves in formal and informal situations. So by the end of this lesson, you will know exactly what to say in a formal situation and in an informal situation when you want to introduce yourself. So for both of those situations, I'm going to give you tips and then examples of things to say. So let's start off with a formal speaking situation. And that is going to be a situation where you don't know the person very well, or it's a work meeting, a job interview, or you are asking somebody a question, you are calling to make an appointment with the doctor. These are all formal speaking situations. So the first tip, and that's really important, is that in British culture, being polite and being courteous is very, very important. And it's likely that the other person is going to respond in a much warmer and better way than if we start off being rude or unpleasant. So it's really important to think about our body language. So obviously, if we're meeting somebody for the first time, we're going to think about our body language, keeping our body language open and friendly. We wouldn't close our arms like this. We try and be open, and we be mindful of our facial expression. Smiling, open, really welcoming. And number 2, we are going to think about keeping the introduction simple. We are not going to start speaking, introduce ourselves, and keep talking. We need to allow space for the other person to respond. So the second tip is give a simple introduction and then wait for the other person to respond. The third tip is if it's a formal speaking situation, it's quite typical to shake each other's hands. So if you feel comfortable and it feels appropriate, you might lean over, extend your hand, and it's likely that the other person will take your hand and shake your hand, or it might be that the other person extends their hand, in which case you are going to reciprocate. So those are the main 3 tips in a formal speaking situation. Now let's give some examples of the things you might say. So the first thing to think about is you are always going to greet the other person. So the greeting. Now, it's a formal speaking situation, so you're not going to say hi. No, you're going to use a bit more of a formal greeting. So you might say, hello, hello, or you might say, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on what time of day it is. Just another tip. In English, when we are greeting somebody, and even if it's night time, we don't say good night. Good night is only used when somebody is going to bed. So if it's night time or late afternoon, we would say good evening. So now we have greeted the person. Now we need to give our name, say who we are. So I might say, I'm Sandy. Now, if it's a formal situation, like a job interview, or I have not spoken to that person before, I would usually also give my surname because it's more formal. So I might say, I'm Sandy Smith. So that's quite typical. Now, another thing I might say is, my name is Sandy Smith. So I could say, I'm Sandy Smith, or my name is Sandy Smith. Now, the third thing I need to say is why I'm there. This is if I'm meeting somebody in person. They've seen my facial expression, my body language. I have greeted the person. I've said who I am. Now I need to explain why I'm there. What is the purpose of me being there? So I might say, I'm here for the job interview. Or if I'm there to meet somebody, I might say, I'm here to meet Mr. Higgins. So putting it all together, I could say, good morning, I'm Sandy Smith. I'm here to meet Mr. Higgins. And I'm going to wait for the other person to respond. Now, let's assume it's a formal speaking situation, but it's not in person, it's on the phone. So obviously I can't see the other person, I can't see their facial expression, I can't use body language to communicate. My voice is very, very important. Again, I need to be mindful, to be polite, and to be courteous. And you can hear if somebody's voice is light and pleasant. So again, I'm going to start with a greeting, hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I'm Sandy Smith. My name is Sandy Smith, or my name is Sandy. And then I'm going to say the reason why I'm calling. I'm calling to make an appointment, please. Or if I'm calling to speak to somebody, I might say, may I please speak to Mr. Brown? Or if I'm calling for assistance to ask for help, I might say, I wonder if you can help me, please. I wonder if you can help me, please. Then I wait and the other person will say, of course, and then I can explain further. So that's formal speaking situations. So now let's talk about informal speaking situations and how to introduce ourselves. What are informal speaking situations? These are moments when we might be out with a friend or a group of friends and we are meeting a new group of people or another person, somebody or a group of people we've never met before. So in these situations, it's also important to be mindful of our body language, to be smiling and to be welcoming. That's always good. It's a good way to start any conversation. Now, the second tip, in these situations where we're out with a friend or a group of friends and they introduce us to somebody new, it's always good to say, as part of our introduction, to say how we know the mutual friend. What is the connection? And that's a really good way of starting a conversation. So let me give you an example. Let's start with how we introduce ourselves in a more informal speaking situation. Now, obviously, if we are amongst friends, people we know well, we can be a lot more relaxed, and have a lot more freedom as to what language we use and how we introduce ourselves. But let's talk about meeting somebody new or a group of people we've never met before in a more informal context. As before, the first thing we do is we need to start with the greeting. So as it's an informal situation, we don't need to say good morning or good afternoon. We can say hi, hello, or hiya. Hiya we use a lot in England. Then after we have greeted the person or the people, we now go on to introducing ourselves, saying who we are, giving our name. Now, as it's an informal speaking situation, we don't really need to give our surname. It wouldn't really make any sense. So we might say, hello, I'm Sandy. Hi, I'm Sandy. So that's a lovely way of starting the conversation and introducing ourselves. Now, let's go on to the part 3, the part where we explain the connection. say who we are and how we know the mutual friend. Now, some nice things to say are, "Hi, I'm Sandy. I'm Rob's friend from school." So I'm sitting there at the pub with my friend Rob. Some of his friends come in and I introduce myself. I greet them, I say who I am, and I say how I know Rob. "Hiya, I'm Sandy. I'm Rob's work colleague." So that's a lovely way of introducing yourselves in an informal speaking situation. Now, another thing to add that is really nice is to say, "Nice to meet you." Nice to meet you. So let's put it all together again. "Hello, I'm Sandy. I'm Rob's friend from school. Nice to meet you." And then I'm going to stop and allow the other person or the other people to respond. And then everybody will say how they know Rob, and then the conversation can get started. I hope today's lesson has been useful and that you've learned lots of new and useful ways of introducing yourselves in formal and informal speaking situations. As I said before, introducing ourselves is something we do all the time, every day, in every language. So there are going to be so many opportunities to practice these new phrases in your everyday English. If there are any lessons you would like, please do note them in the comments section below. Lovely to see you. Keep practicing and please do subscribe to our channel. Bye.